Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on addressing energy cybersecurity through state cyber governance bodies. My name is John Guerrero with NGA Cybersecurity Program, and I'm excited to introduce our session today and our speakers, but first wanted to go over a few quick housekeeping items. So today's call is being recorded, and we will be sharing both the slides and a recording afterwards. All participants are muted upon entry, just to avoid background noise. We do have some time reserved for audience questions at the end of our session today, and we definitely encourage our audience to ask our speakers questions. To ask a question, please enter it into the chat or the question box. We'll be monitoring the chat, and I can raise any questions up to our panel. Also, you can hit the hand icon to raise your hand, and NGA will be able to unmute you. Or if you're calling through your phone, simply dial *6 and make sure your phone is not on mute, and you should be able to speak. If none of the above work and you would like to send in your question, or if you're having any technical difficulties, please email my colleague, Matt Rogotsky, at the email address on the screen, MROGOTZKE@nga.org. All right. So when it comes to state cybersecurity, governors have often relied on their authority to establish governance bodies, councils, task force, commissions, etc., that address the complex nature of state cybersecurity. These bodies can serve in an advisory capacity, they can make recommendations, or work to design and implement a statewide strategic plan. While the topic of today's session is timely given the recent Colonial Pipeline incident, governors and these bodies are increasingly focusing on the cyber posture of critical infrastructure sectors, particularly energy. NGA recently summarized 8 states' energy cybersecurity governance bodies in a white paper that my colleague Dan Loff, NGA's Energy Program Director, will provide a brief overview on, as well as upcoming NGA energy cybersecurity work. And we are fortunate to have 2 of those 8 states present today. So after Dan's overview, we'll hear from Dr. Ramesh Kolaru, Commissioner of the a commissioner on the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission and a vice president for research, innovation, and economic development, as well as a School of Computing and Informatics professor at University of Louisiana Lafayette. Ramesh will speak to the work done by the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission, which was established by Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards in 2017. Governor Edwards is also the co-chair of NGA's Resource Center for State Cybersecurity. Afterwards, we'll hear from Danielle McGrath, president of the Indiana Energy Association, and Bob Richhart, the chief technology officer for Hoosier Energy and co-chair of the Indiana Energy Committee. Danielle and Bob will give an overview of the Energy Committee, one of 20 subcommittees of the Indiana Executive Council on Cybersecurity that was established in 2017 by Governor Holcomb. And then finally, we'll close with an opportunity for audience questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Great, thanks so much, John, and thanks to all of you on the line for joining us today. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Dan Loft, the Energy Program Director here at the NGA Center. I wanted to jump on the line quickly to share an update on the variety of resources that we are developing to support governor's offices and the states on energy sector cybersecurity preparedness, coordination, information sharing, and response, and then provide a brief update and overview of the paper we will be diving deeper into today. Now, the projects that you see on this slide currently are a collaboration between NGA's Energy Learning Network, NGA's Cybersecurity Resource Center, and NGA's Homeland Security Advisors Council. So this really is one of those cross-cutting topics that we've been diving deeper and deeper into, given the ongoing importance of this topic to the states, as well as our federal and industry partners. So of note, I won't talk through all of this, but I do want to point out a couple of resources that I think will be relevant to you all on the line. The first is a paper that we anticipate will be released later this month on energy cybersecurity partnerships and information sharing between the states, federal government, and the utility sector. We have been getting quite a few questions on this topic of late, and this paper will provide a real good, robust deep dive into the roles that states can play coordinating, sharing, and receiving information from these partners. We are also diving deeper into the risks of foreign influence in critical energy infrastructure and the roles that states can play. This is, of course, largely cybersecurity focused, although there is a physical threat and component as well. And we look forward to having that document come out shortly. Beyond that, we are continuing to coordinate in a robust way with the various councils and governing bodies on the industry side, and working with states to do so. So that includes the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, Oil and Natural Gas Subsector Coordinating Council, and in preparation for the GridX 6 exercise occurring later this year, NERC and the Electricity ISAC. So if you have questions about any of these, or if you have any requests related to energy sector cybersecurity, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to John, and we would be happy to assist you. So John, next slide, please. So of particular relevance to this webinar, of course, is our new report addressing cybersecurity for critical energy infrastructure through state governing bodies. I think John provided a really good overview of the topic, and this paper does explore in a deep way how states and governors can address vulnerabilities facing the cybersecurity of the energy sector through statewide governance bodies, things like task forces, working groups, councils, or other cross-entity coordination mechanisms. Given the industry and utility leadership in securing the sector, since much of this infrastructure is not state infrastructure, but also the unique roles that states can play, and of course the dependency of all sectors on the energy sector, these governing bodies can be effective mechanisms to both understand the threats facing energy, delineate the state's roles, and support the energy sector in preparedness, response, and recovery, including coordination around messaging. So in this paper, we profile 8 states and the various ways in which they have incorporated energy into these governance structures, rolling up some of the practices learned along the way to provide guidance to other governors or states that may be considering doing the same. So I won't go into depth on any of those because we do have experts from 2 of those states on the line today, and I want to make sure we leave as much time for them as possible, and I do want to extend my thanks as well to the leaders we have from Indiana and Louisiana. So with that, thanks, John, for giving me the opportunity, and to our speakers for joining us, and I'll transition it back to you, John.
Great, thank you, Dan. Well, with that, I am excited to introduce Dr. Ramesh Kolaru, who will speak to the work done by the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission. Dr. Kolaru, are you on the line?
Yes, John. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you, John. Thank you, Matthew and Dan and others at NGA for this invitation to share what we've been doing in Louisiana and to learn in equal measure what's happening in Indiana and other parts of the country. And before I even dive into this, I want to thank NGA for their partnership throughout this process that Louisiana has had since the governor, as John noted, established the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission through an executive order in December of 2017. And the National Governors Association has been a key partner in helping us through various parts of our journey here to this point. And I hope I'll touch on those in a few moments as we go forward. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is an overview of the Governor's Cybersecurity Commission. As I just said, that it was established on December 7th of 2017 through an executive order. But as you look at the Commission's goals that are outlined in this on this particular slide, suffice it to say, it was the vision of Governor John Bel Edwards, not only to establish this commission to enhance the state's cybersecurity posture, improve cyber hygiene at all levels, at individual level, at small business, large business, as well as state agencies, and so on. But in his mind's eye, he rightly saw that getting improving cyber posture of Louisiana was going to be an enabler, a key differentiator in helping retain existing businesses in Louisiana, improving their ability to survive cyber attacks and enhance their cybersecurity posture, but also recruit new business and industry, because as a state, we would have created an ecosystem that would allow continuity of operations, that would invest in right kinds of K through 12 programs, higher education programs. And so we would have talent, we would have resources coupled with already existing critical infrastructure assets that we knew were not only important for Louisiana, but the rest of the nation. So for us in Louisiana, in response to the Governor's Cybersecurity Commission and his vision for the establishment of this is a broad encompassing vision of creating a set of enablers that position Louisiana's business and industry and Louisiana's public universities and others to join forces to create an opportunity for economic development, economic diversification, and of course, expanded cybersecurity capabilities in Louisiana. Next slide, please. So I'll walk through, I mean, again, this is a timeline. The work of the commission is supported by the chair and the vice chair, Craig Spawn from North Louisiana from the Cyber Innovation Center, and the Adjutant General of Louisiana, Keith Waddell, chair and co-chair the committee, the Governor's Cybersecurity Commission, along with various commissioners that are appointed by the governor. But suffice it to say, in Louisiana, the Louisiana National Guard has taken a key and a very prominent role in helping staff and expand the capabilities of the state in this area. And I'm joined on the phone by Kenny Donnelly, who serves as the executive director of the Louisiana Cybersecurity Commission, and he keeps us on our toes on a daily basis, getting us organized and making sure that we are answering the call and are responsive to the vision of the governors and are moving the programs and initiatives forward. So since its establishment in 2017, which includes, these 15 members that I'll have on the next slide are people that are drawn from key stakeholder organizations, subject matter experts, professionals from academia and industry and law enforcement from a broad cross-section of Louisiana stakeholders. And those individuals got organized into 8 standing committees in 2018. That resulted in the establishment of those committees and a program of work throughout those committees. This first strategic plan that I have highlighted and bolded was completed in 2017 through 2021. That is what we are currently operating under. And in 2019, we had the National Governors Association facilitating a workshop on that allowed us to pull all the various critical infrastructure owners and operators in the state of Louisiana across all the 16 DHS identified critical infrastructure sectors. That resulted in the development of the first ever critical infrastructure cybersecurity plan in Louisiana. And that work is still ongoing, along with the work of various other committees, including the establishment of a talent initiative fund to fund the development of new degree programs and certificates in cybersecurity, because for us, it was important to grow the talent that would be able to serve the growing needs of business and industry in the area of cybersecurity. And while in equal measure, we were developing programs and initiatives within state agencies as well as private sector, working in concert with the Louisiana Department of Economic Development and Small Business Development Centers, as well as our procurement and technical assistance centers in enhancing cyber hygiene and cyber capabilities within our small to medium-sized enterprises. Next slide, please. So again, as I noted, in 2019, we had this critical infrastructure workshop that was in response to a proposal, a comparative proposal that Louisiana had submitted along with various others to the NGA to receive technical assistance and guidance from the National Governors Association. And I can't tell you how helpful it was to have oversight and guidance from NGA. Maggie Brunner was a godsend, along with John and various others who helped hold our hand as we developed this process, and the thoughtful engagement of the various public and private critical infrastructure owners and operators across the state of Louisiana. That I was fortunate to lead that effort, working with another of my commissioners, Mr. Mark Northrup and Dr. Arun Lakotia, who is a cybersecurity expert at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, in addition to being the founder of a startup company that came out of the university in the area of cybersecurity. So now, thanks to all of that effort, working with the stakeholders from across the state that were owners and operators of our critical infrastructure assets, as I mentioned a moment ago, that effort of engagement and thoughtful constituent engagement with stakeholders, as well as guidance from the NGA, has now resulted in the establishment of critical infrastructure cybersecurity resilience plan for the state of Louisiana, including private and public sector critical infrastructure players. But in addition to this critical infrastructure committee that we had, we also had one of the committees that was established by the governor as part of his executive order was the information sharing committee that I also had the opportunity to chair. But over the past few months, year and a half or so of doing this, we realized that these were two sides of the same coin, and we needed to bring those two committees together. So that was formally done earlier this year on the 25th of March. So now I chair the Critical Infrastructure plus Information Sharing Committee along with my co-chair, Dr. Arun Lakotia, and just recently reached out to our Protective Security Advisor for Louisiana for DHS, PSA, and had discussions with him, inviting him to serve as a co-chair of this Critical Infrastructure Committee as well, because we want to make sure that we are bringing in the right stakeholders into this kind of capability, along with various other committees that you see on the next on this slide here. Next slide, please. One of the things before John transitions to the next slide that I want to talk about is the maritime industry. That has now gotten established as its own committee under the commission, whereas we seeded the development of that committee through an information sharing ISAC conversation that we facilitated with at the intersection of critical infrastructure and information sharing. And as more and more stakeholders came together and that process matured, it became important to us. For a state like Louisiana, as you can imagine, maritime industry sector is big, and we wanted to make sure that while we seeded the development of the activity, it got spun off into its own committee under the commission, and now it is a vibrant committee that includes the stakeholders that is needed. And the next in line, perhaps in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic that we had in last year, is the healthcare sector that is currently a part of the information sharing critical infrastructure work that we are doing. But I think in the next few months to come, we are likely to spin that off into its own committee with its ability to have sector-specific information sharing protocols, etc., that are able to be established as part of those committees. So in our own way, we are serving as a factory of spin-offs within our critical infrastructure sectors that are important for the economy and also public health and well-being of the state of Louisiana. And I couldn't be more proud of the work that we do as part of the Governance Cybersecurity Commission here. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I mean, as all of us can very clearly attest to, cyber systems and critical infrastructure assets are vital to the state of Louisiana and the US. And as we know, the disruption or destruction of any of those assets could impact our way of life, our economic vitality, our public health, and our national security. And in Louisiana, we are blessed with enough of these critical infrastructure assets, ranging from oil and gas operations, petrochemical operations, pipelines, transportation sectors, as well as a very vibrant agricultural sector that supports the nation's energy, chemical, commodity, and food supply. And we've, over the years, done various specific point analyses of the dependence of the rest of the nation on Louisiana's critical infrastructure assets as part of our research efforts at the university and various other partners. So prior to the establishment of this Cybersecurity Commission and this work that the National Governors Association facilitated, there was no coordinated or systematic effort in the state of Louisiana where we brought public sector critical infrastructure owners and operators in responding to cyber attacks. However, going back to Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, we had an initiative, and then during Gustav and Ike in 2008, we had an initiative that was called the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center that became the state of Louisiana's official public-private partnership. This was a mechanism that we established because during Katrina and Rita, we realized that there was a need to bring in the public and the private sector partners together across all aspects of disaster management for information sharing and coordination of efforts. And those efforts led to the development of the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center as an all hazards information sharing, situational awareness conduit between the public and the private sectors that continues even during the course of this most recent pandemic and every disaster between 2005 and 2021 in Louisiana. The Business Emergency Operations Center is activated as part of the state of Louisiana's official ESF functions, and when the state EOC is activated, concurrently the Business Emergency Operations Center is activated to serve as that conduit. So we had a leg. So going back to 2005, 2008, based on the research of in public-private partnerships and understanding of the best practices in information sharing and coordinated situational awareness in Louisiana, we were blessed to have this foundational knowledge, and that led us to transition when cybersecurity became a major priority. And as part of the governor's efforts, we had a leg up in the information sharing regime already in place in Louisiana and have continued to build on those. So as part of the critical infrastructure resiliency plan, assessing cyber security posture of Louisiana's public and private sector critical infrastructure assets and establishing risk-informed priorities is one of the phases, one of the objectives, and then enhancing trust and creating memoranda of understanding with private sector stakeholders and creating and exercising the plan were the three proposed goals or the three primary goals. Next slide, please. And along the way, as the team, the Cybersecurity Commission, work with the governor and work with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness in building a capability for ESF 17, which became our incident response annex that was added to the state's emergency management plan or emergency operations plan in 2019. And having that ESF 17, which includes our Office of Technology Services, the Governor's Office of Homeland Security, our Fusion Center, our National Guard, our state police, and various federal partners, gave us the ability to respond, which you will see on the next slide, the attacks that we had on our school systems at the beginning of the school year. So next slide, please. In 2019, when we had July of 2019, reports of multiple ransomware attacks on Louisiana's public school systems and various school boards got impacted by that. Having the ESF 17 on the back of an envelope, literally, but being able to build that out provided us an opportunity to respond to those attacks in a coordinated manner, work across this ecosystem of partners that I've just discussed on the previous slide, and being able to start the school year on time on August the 13th with significant numbers of not only compromised public health, public parish school boards that you see, but also preventing of those that are shown as parishes that were on whom cyber attacks were prevented. So the response numbers are there for you to see. But again, this ESF capability and formalizing our incident response framework as part of the overall Cybersecurity Commission's efforts that has led the state of Louisiana to be in a formal posture of being prepared to handle these attacks. Next slide. So where we go from here in terms of our next steps on Critical Infrastructure Information Sharing Committee is we've finished our work with the NGA workshop, though based on Dan's slide, I was actually making a note of the energy cybersecurity information sharing paper that you have and the report that you've made available, and I'm suspecting that there will be future interactions and leaning on NGA to hold our hand as we go through this information sharing critical infrastructure within the energy sector. So we finished the phase 1 of the plan, which is to collect information related to critical infrastructures in Louisiana, mapping those and identifying risk-informed priorities within those. But the next phases of looking at the cyber readiness of these critical infrastructure assets, analyzing them for consequences of disruption, including understanding and mapping out of critical infrastructure cross-sector interdependencies, is next phase of is phase 2. And then phase 3 is translating those into a prioritization and a risk-informed plan for the state of Louisiana. These are the 2 tasks that are ahead of us, ahead of the work of the Cybersecurity Commission, as well as more particularly the Critical Infrastructure Information Sharing Committee. As I mentioned a moment ago, I think our focus in 2021 is to see where we go with the healthcare sector next, possibly spinning it off into its own committee, and then focusing our energies on the energy sector. Next slide. And this perhaps is my last slide. When we have natural disasters in Louisiana that happen on a routine basis, and they tend to impact our energy industry in a significant way. As you can imagine, Hurricane Laura mangled transmission towers in Southeast Louisiana and impacted Southwest Louisiana in a big way, and also impacted the production of oil. And the most recent hack that on Colonial Pipeline infrastructure only suggests to us that we should use this crisis as an opportunity to enhance our focus on cybersecurity within the state energy assurance plan, and lead to perhaps the development of Louisiana's energy critical infrastructure cybersecurity, and understand the players that we need to convene to the table across the entirety of the fossil fuel sector. So we have oil and gas, petrochemical, processing, manufacturing, and of course, energy companies that become part of that value chain. And we need to make sure that all of those players are at the table in ensuring that the state is prepared for attacks like the Colonial Pipeline attack. Fortunately for Louisiana, the Colonial Pipeline was not a huge impact. I mean, we got impacted just like everyone else got impacted in terms of supply chain. But the state leaned forward. Our ESF 17 reached out to folks from CISA to offer assistance, and to think that all of this happened because of a single compromised password and VPN vulnerabilities only suggests to all of us that cyber hygiene and doing the basics right is certainly still going to be the most important element of being prepared. And that is certainly the work that we believe is ahead of us as we convene during this fall and going forward. Energy industry players in preparing for the development of an energy sector specific committee that will continue its work as we spin those off into the future. But I'll stop here by underlining the need, as most recently articulated and amplified by the attack on the Colonial Pipeline, that, as all of us know, critical infrastructures, regardless of their location, an impact on those have tremendous impacts on the rest of the nation and our ability, our economy, our way of life. And those of us that sit on those critical infrastructures in South Louisiana take that obligation seriously, because our ability to strengthen the cyber defenses of these assets will be one of the ways in which we can serve the nation. And that's something that we and our own business and industry partners in Louisiana, and that's at least something that this commission is focused on, and the work of the committee will be defined by these priorities going forward. John, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, for that excellent overview of the commission. If anybody in the audience has any questions, I would just ask to hold those for the end of today's session. We'll have some time reserved at the end, but please, if you do have them, feel free to send them through the chat or the question box. Thanks again, Ramesh. And now I'd like to turn it over to Bob Richhart and Danielle McGrath from Indiana's Executive Council on Cybersecurity Energy Committee.
Thank you, John. So as we start through the slides here, we'll talk a little bit about the background, the time leading up to where we are today. Next slide, please. So this all began in 2017, January 2017, with Governor Holcomb's executive order. Next slide. And the mission related to that executive order, in order to protect the security and economy of the state, it was appropriate and necessary for state government to establish and lead a statewide collaborative effort involving government, private sector, military, research, and academic stakeholders to enhance Indiana's cybersecurity. Next slide, please. And just to run through some of the directives related to that executive order: establishing an effective governing structure and strategic direction for the group, to formalize strategic cybersecurity partnerships across the public and the private sectors, to strengthen best practices in terms of protecting information technology infrastructure, and to build and maintain robust statewide cyber incident response capabilities. Next slide. Additionally, to establish processes, the technology, and the facilities to improve cybersecurity across the state, to leverage business and economic opportunities related to the information, critical infrastructure, and of network security, to ensure a robust workforce and talent pipeline in fields involving cybersecurity. Next, please. And so this graphic kind of represents an overview in terms of the collaboration and all of the supporting infrastructure related to this process. So it's a collaboration of state and local government, finance, the energy sectors, water and wastewater, communication sector, healthcare, defense, and elections. And that's supporting cybersecurity across economic development, workforce development, resiliency and response, supports cyber awareness and sharing, personal identifiable information, legal and other areas. And again, the whole prospect here is that collaboration across all of these groups and the results from all of these groups and the work that's been done by the various committees will support cybersecurity and the safety of cyber assets across the state. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of review of the council, overall, there are more than 250 members. That's across 15 teams and 1 council overall. Complete plans with 4 areas, including the energy area, research and planning, implementation, and for evaluation. Next slide, please. And so representing the Energy Committee here today, the chair of the committee, Danielle McGrath, who's the president of the Indiana Energy Association, the co-chair, myself, Robert Richhart, the CTO for Hoosier Energy. Next, please. And so in terms of the deliverables from the onset of the Executive Cybersecurity Committee, first deliverables, critical infrastructure information. So the deliverable there is for the committee, the Energy Committee, to provide definitions and policies that provide for a broad understanding of all the most critical issues and processes that are necessary to protect all cyber assets across the state. And so that was completed early on in the process there in 2018. Next, please. Deliverable number 2, related to training. The Energy Committee provided the IECC Workforce Development Committee with the needs of the energy sector and examples for consideration as Indiana cybersecurity training and apprenticeship programs were being developed. This allowed for a tremendous collaboration effort across all of the stakeholders. That's still occurring today, and that is certainly ongoing. Next slide, please. Deliverable 3, related to contacts. More than 85% of the Indiana utilities provided a cybersecurity contact to the Indiana Homeland Security Department to establish a communication link for coordination on any and all cybersecurity initiatives or events. So the IURC's emergency support function lead will maintain this list of utility cybersecurity contacts going forward for IDHS. So again, this allows for a comprehensive and a swift response in terms of coordinating across the sector in Indiana so that all utilities are aware of the efforts going on from the state and vice versa. Next slide, please. Deliverable number 4, coordination with others. So the IECC Energy Committee coordinated with other committees and working groups to effectively complete the state cybersecurity strategic plan for the established goals. So again, all committees there working together, all sectors and state government working together to make sure all of the goals that were established were complete. The Energy Committee also shared information with the Energy ISAC regarding Indiana's new cyber sharing resources to ensure that the ISAC was aware of all potential resources related to cybersecurity awareness and for mitigation. Next slide, please. And deliverable number 5, coming out of the group in the first round, were the metrics. And so the Energy Committee providing the utility industry an annual survey to assess cybersecurity plans, preparedness, and recovery procedures. 100% of all the utilities completed the survey, and a summary of results was sent to the IECC. So again, very good cooperation there across all the utilities, and all certainly seeing the value of developing the metrics and understanding where everybody's at, large or small, in terms of utilities across the state. And with that, I will turn it over to Danielle.
Great, thank you so much, Bob. You can go to the next slide, please. So as we were getting ready to craft our 2021-2022 plan, we really wanted to reflect on what had been done the prior 2 years, certainly what had changed, in the environment, pandemic, and then ultimately just having conversations about where we wanted to go as an industry to make sure that Indiana was on the right track. And so for this first deliverable, as you can see here, it's very similar to the way that it was worded the first time around in terms of revisiting the definitions as well as looking at state level policy changes. And so this was important because both of these are evergreen issues. The topics and the policy are constantly evolving. And so we always want to make sure from year to year that this is something that we are staying on top of, and that if there are best practices that can and should be implemented and or updated, that we're prepared to do so. The same is true for the next deliverable having to do with training. So the first time around, we really focused on the fact that there was a worker shortage at the time, and we wanted to engage with the school systems to see how we could further develop the talent pipeline. And so this time around, we started asking ourselves with the pandemic, the fact that we have more and more workers than ever before working from home, is there a difference in the type of training that they may have received before versus what they may need to be successful in the workforce today as well as tomorrow? And so we were going to issue a survey to go ahead and identify those training needs specific to the energy industry. And then based on that survey and its results, we'll then identify and recommend opportunities at the state, vocational, and or higher educational levels so that, to the collaboration point that Bob had made earlier, we can implement those changes and continue to coordinate across the various sectors. Next slide, please. All right, now this next deliverable is actually new, but the template and the framework have already been implemented. And so through recent conversations with state regulators who are an integral part of this task force as well, we determined the need for smaller natural gas companies to also participate in these conversations. And so when the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission had hosted these types of forums in the past, they had largely been targeted at the larger companies for both gas as well as electric. Many times these companies have the resources, they have the personnel on staff to manage their systems and are truly the cybersecurity experts. But for some of the smaller companies, they don't always have the same level of resources. And so the commission is taking a little bit of a different approach. So rather than coming in, and saying, here's what we need to know, what are you doing, how are you going to accomplish it? They're using NARUC as the kind of the template for gathering the information to determine how the companies are scoring, how they could potentially benefit from additional information. They'll then take that information and construct a forum to make sure that it's really about presenting resources for their use and then encouraging them to implement best practices where appropriate. So really supposed to be a helpful educational forum. And so that'll be taking place later on this fall. And this was something that we certainly wanted to highlight, given the fact that it's been successful in the past, and we have no doubt it'll be successful going ahead this time as well. Then the next deliverable is our resource guide. And so this kind of gets to a similar point in that so many times larger companies have access to information, whether it be through trade groups or organizations, nonprofits. They have the ability to gather this information and process it with their teams. But in many cases, smaller entities just don't have that capability. And so we thought by leveraging the expertise of all of the members on our group, that we would be able to develop a resource guide whereby we're pulling in and cutting through, all these extraneous, resources to gather what's best, what really makes sense, and how do we bullet point it out and make sure it's easy to navigate and easy to get to the actual information that companies may need to be successful in this area. And so that's another one that we will be developing later on this year. Next slide, please. And then the last one is all about workplace IT. Whereas before we had looked at the actual personnel piece in terms of, how do we actually, train them? How do we get them in the talent pipeline and then into the companies, where it's needed? This one is more about the operational side of things. We learned through the pandemic that things can and did change. And so being able to reflect on the challenges that are still present, possibly even the best practices that we may want to keep, even, post-pandemic life, whether it be, in our control centers, the operation rooms, whatever it may be. We wanted to develop a survey just to kind of see, what are some things that we've learned, what are the challenges that we're experiencing, especially with so many workers working from home. In the energy industry, it's a little bit different. You've got to be in those rooms, and we took, major steps to make sure that that was possible during a very, 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 very challenging time. And so with that, it's really just about, like I said, surveying it and then seeing if anything else is needed. Next slide. All right, what we have up here is the landing page for Indiana's Cybersecurity Hub. There is a wealth of information on this site. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to visit Indiana's webpage, I would highly recommend that you log on. It's tailored by sector. And so if you're a business, that first button there is exactly where you go. Government entities, education, individuals. There's even a tool right here on this homepage where you can assess yourself. By taking a variety of different tests and using tools to see what, if any, vulnerabilities there may be. Next slide, please. And then in addition to that, you can report a cybercrime. Like I said, find sector-specific information, see the IECC's strategic plan, learn about upcoming events, training opportunities. Also on this page, you can find various news releases, and there's even a blog that's up with interviews with various cybersecurity experts. So like I said, wealth of information, definitely check it out if you haven't already. And the next slide. And if you do have any questions to that point, Shatrice is our program director. She's fantastic to work with. We'll be able to follow up and provide you with any, answers to questions that you may have or resources that may be of help to other states and or business professionals. So with that, that concludes Indiana's presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Danielle and Bob. For the audience, please feel free, if you have any questions for our panel, please feel free to submit your questions into the chat box, into the Q&A box, raise your hand, and NGA staff will be able to unmute you. I did have a few questions. We had one come in on Indiana's, the energy cybersecurity training that you had mentioned, Danielle. Who provided that training and how was it funded?
I am actually going to defer to Bob on this one. I just joined the Energy Committee this last year. And so Bob has actually been on for the former 2 years. And so Bob, would you mind addressing that one?
Yeah, that was through a number of resources. There was some training that was coordinated through the National Guard, the State Police Group, but there was also a number of resources for training through Ivy Tech. And so it was a multitude of resources is the way I would respond to that, provided that training. The state itself, through the hub and other online resources, certainly provided some of those kinds of training opportunities as well, but there were a number of resources.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And Ramesh, I had a quick question for you. You had mentioned the different assessments of the cyber posture of the different critical infrastructure sectors. Was there a specific framework that you were using for that, or was it kind of a combination of several different ones?
We embraced the NIST framework. The NIST cybersecurity framework was what we thought in order to standardize our efforts and consistent with the national best practices. So we did embrace the NIST framework. And but I would be interested in what Indiana's self-assessment tools would look like, because that's an area that we would like to do more of. And going back to the website that Mega Belief showed, what might be self-assessment tools, because that's an area that we are looking at doing more than what we currently have in place. So I'm answering your question with an answer and a question.
I'm sorry, Ramesh, do you mind repeating that?
I mean, so as I said, it was using the NIST framework. So that was the answer. But I also asked a question about Indiana's use of a self-assessment tool. It seems like that was on their website. Can someone from Indiana answer what
Yes,
that tool looks like?
that's correct. So there are several different tools. So if you go online, you saw that button where it says assess yourself, for example. There's the Pew Cybersecurity Knowledge Quiz, just to see, do you actually know anything about cybersecurity? The NIST, Are You Safe Online? Stop, Think, Connect quiz. So those are more educational, as kind of that basic foundation for the individual. You then get into business and government. And so there's the Indiana Cybersecurity Scorecard. And this was actually developed with the state of Indiana and Purdue University. And this is a 22-question tool that provides a score on where your organization stands in cybersecurity. And then there's another one for businesses, just the Better Business Bureau. I guess they have a 7-question quiz to tell where your organization's at. But that cybersecurity scorecard in particular, developed with Purdue, is probably more of what you're looking for, and shows the collaboration happening not just between the state, but with private industry as well as the educational system.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Danielle. We had a question come in, just, the increase in ransomware is affecting all sectors. It's been just that the issue has really become a priority, or it's really been elevated, I think, in the national lens over the past few months. Has kind of the outbreak or the wave of ransomware, has that affected how your state has looked at cybersecurity, especially in the critical infrastructure sectors, or in the energy sector specifically?
Just speaking from personal experience, I know that, when we're engaging with different public officials, state agencies, it appears that cybersecurity is coming up more and more, not just from, a headline perspective, but what has Indiana done? What are we doing in this space? What do we need to be doing? Is there anything I can do to help? And so these are all very encouraging conversations that are being had, but you don't know what you don't know. And so certainly we want people to ask the question to understand that we do have an organization and a council in place that's been looking at this, and that we're going to continue to ramp up those efforts over the next 2 years, which I know have many people at least knowing that government's on top of this, businesses on top of this, and these critical conversations are taking place.
Excellent. And as I mentioned, in the context of Louisiana, while it is not necessarily in relation to energy industry related attacks and ransomware, the example that I gave of the standing up of the ESF-17 in response to and their activities and response in relation to the school attacks on the school systems is an illustrative example of how our response and having in the ESF-17 and continuing to mature that model based on lessons learned from the public schools, from the parish school system about attacks is an illustrative example of how, I guess, ransomware is here to stay, and we need to at least keep up, if not keep a step ahead or two ahead of those perpetrators.
And John, the only thing I would add to that, again, from Indiana, working with a utility here in Indiana, is we have certainly been very diligent in terms of layers of defense for our systems. I'm sure all utilities are, but this has caused us to kind of double down in terms of training and communication with our employees and with the other folks that we work with, just in terms of making sure they are scrutinizing emails and various entrance points in terms of how ransomware perpetrators make their access for these kinds of attacks. So it's certainly been an area where training, education for employees has been an emphasis point for us.
Somewhat related to that, just to that kind of the national spotlight on ransomware. All three of you had talked a bit about how your respective commissions or councils were the creation or created through a governor's executive order. And I wanted to see if you could speak more about the role that the governor would play in creating these bodies, and just, I guess, messaging that and the importance of energy cybersecurity, and then how it is a common goal between state and private actors, or private sector actors, excuse me.
Let me start by saying, again, not necessarily exclusively in the context of energy, but the governor has used his bully pulpit every opportunity he has had in shining a spotlight on the state's efforts in the area of cybersecurity, supporting any number of legislations that are going through, including legislation that has funding connected to it to establish the talent program that I talked about, and also, like I said, using the cybersecurity preparedness months in October to launch any number of programs, but then reinforcing continually the message that cyber attacks and cybersecurity is an ongoing threat, and we need to make sure that that at all levels there is a higher level of preparedness. And also connecting incentives. I mean, there's discussion about connecting economic development incentives to levels of cybersecurity preparedness. There was conversations that we are beginning to explore. I mean, I referenced the Procurement and Technical Assistance Center in a conversation previously earlier today. And the idea that at the national level, DoD is looking at preferential or requirements of cybersecurity capabilities, and documenting a capability maturity model, using a capability maturity model, a level of preparedness for small businesses doing business with the federal government. We're exploring those kinds of things here in Louisiana to say, what are the opportunities to incentivize behaviors that we seek, where business and industry can internally embrace the best practices in cybersecurity, enhance their own capabilities, insofar as they do business with state of Louisiana and with the state government. Is that an opportunity? There was also conversations about the state of Louisiana has significant economic development incentives to recruit companies, to retain companies. Conversations around, is there enabling policy and incentive structures that we can create to reward the kinds of behaviors that we seek to reinforce. So it's an all of the above kind of an approach. The governor using his bully pulpit to reinforce the value and the need for and to shine a spotlight on the work of the ESF 17, for example. He used his most recent address at the National Governors Association to talk about the work of ESF 17 and their ability to be organized in order to help the state through these ransomware attacks on our school systems. That was an important illustrative nod by the leader of the state in reinforcing the activities of not only the commission, but more importantly, using that as an opportunity to give out a clarion call saying this is important, more people need to get involved in doing this.
Yeah, John, I would just add from Indiana, Governor Holcomb has done an outstanding job, in my view, of drawing upon technical resources and experts in the private and public sectors and bringing all of us together in a collaborative fashion, both for the committee in terms of going after many of these goals, in terms of making the state safer and in a better place in terms of cybersecurity. He's had the foresight to draw upon resources that already exist across all of the sectors. So that's been very powerful.
Great, thank you, Bob.
And one of the things that I'm sorry to go back to add another, one of the things that I may have briefly glossed over in my outline of the activities of the commission since its inception is the establishment of the state's very first cyber coordination center at the water campus in Baton Rouge, which will serve as a cyber information sharing, the first again in the state that coalesces the efforts of various initiatives that we have underway in the area of information sharing, fusion centers, etc., and bringing them all under one umbrella. And that's a major investment by the governor and an initiative that again documents his commitment to the importance of cybersecurity efforts of Louisiana.
Great, thank you, Ramesh. Real quick, we had a question come through the question box. And I know we're almost out of time, but from the speaker's perspective, are energy providers using their contracts for third and fourth party cybersecurity supply chain risk management?
John, we certainly are, and I see other utilities doing that. We're also providing kind of umbrella support from those third parties we're a co-op, right? So we have a number of member co-ops, and so I see us and I see others doing that for their associated systems as well. So trying to provide those resources on a broad scale from third parties and doing that in a way that you provide the value at a good cost, right, across the board.
Thanks, Bob. Well, with that, it is 4 o'clock. I want to thank our speakers, Bob, Danielle, Ramesh. Thanks for joining us today and sharing your expertise and the work that Indiana and Louisiana have been doing in this on energy cybersecurity. For the audience, thanks for joining today. If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to me. I can put you in contact with our speakers. We will be sharing the recording of today's webinar as well as the slides later this week. All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.